Because like a lot of times I tell small business owners, like, listen, I know AI seems like a lot. It seems a little overwhelming. But in 1999, so did the internet.
Goals in general can be synergistic. You could have goals that are helping you achieve all these other goals. You could have goals that are multiplicative in a positive sense with your other goals that you're achieving.
Not all business is the same, right? The mom and pop shop that's out there, the small to medium business enterprise, is not playing the same game that the big Fortune 500 guys are, right?
Negative autonomy is freedom
Okay.
from control. Positive autonomy is freedom to what you would do if you collaborate rightly with all the other humans and bots at your maximum possible potential.
I used to have no company culture in my business. I've talked about this at extent. It's like I pay you, show up, do the job, make the business a profit, be happy you got a job, right? That's how I used to run my companies. And it was a terrible way to do it. The turnover was awful. People hated to work for me.
But we could have 99.9% of these meetings simulated bots having a million years worth of meetings and then coming back to the people and saying, okay, 99.9% fewer meetings. Here's what we learned from those million hours of meetings.
Hey guys, what up? It's Coach Carroll. Welcome to another episode of the Sales Factory. I've got a treat for you guys today, as I do in every episode, but I've got a guy that I met out in California on my recent journey out there as I did what I call the Tour de la California. I flew into the Bay Area, met some VCs, and hung out with some really cool people out there, and it was my first time in the Bay, and I ended up downtown after having a call with one of the VCs. I said, "Hey, where can I go to get some cool pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge?" So the nice lady, she dropped a pin. She was like, "Hey, there might be this little brewery, like German place that's right here on the dock that you could go check out afterwards." I was like, "All right, sweet." So I took the recommendation. I went over. I meet this lady that's sitting at the bar, and she's like, "Hey, after you get done eating, we're next door. There's a lot of bright individuals over there. You should come over to this bar and check it out. And I think you'll like meeting these people." And I'm like, "All right, why not? Right? When in Rome." And so that's where I met our guest today, Bobby Fishkin, which is like one of the coolest cats that I've ever met. This dude is super unique, very eclectic, and I had so much fun talking to him. And he was one of the only people that the day after meeting him, he sent a follow up text and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation." So, heartfelt guy. I've looked into some of his projects, and I'll give you guys this quick little intro here via ChatGPT. Bobby is a social entrepreneur and innovator, best known for co-founding Reframe It, a company that developed digital annotation technology to facilitate online discussion. He actually graduated magna cum laude in philosophy from Yale. And when I read that, I was like, holy smokes, I've never met anybody from Yale. So that was kind of cool. And with Reframe It, he's also been involved in various other initiatives aimed at leveraging collective intelligence for social impact. He co-leads the Crowd Doing initiative, which I've checked out on YouTube and some other places there, which is really, really cool. And the program operates through partnerships with other social enterprises and reflects Bobby's long-standing goal to harness collective intelligence to solve social problems. Bobby, welcome to the Sales Factory, my man.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, man. And dude, we talked about it. You were telling me about beavers getting airdropped into different areas at the bar. We talked about insurance and how AI is changing the game. And so we probably could go a million different directions here. But I want to know how did you get from graduating at Yale? I see you got a TEDx talk to like us meeting in this bar where like I guess some of these tech founders built this like 10,000 year clock, which was pretty crazy, out in the middle of Texas somewhere, I believe is what it said in there. So take us on that little journey of like from graduating to where you're at today and what you're working on, man.
Multiple fractals. If you want the squiggly line that connects time in Yale to that interval, I can allude to while I was a student, I wrote to a author of books on creativity and urban transformation and got a role as a fellow of the Mayor's Office of Baltimore and the Richard Florida Creativity Group. Through that, I created a program called Arts Creating Community Energy and Social Solutions, where we got 500 pairs of inner city at-risk youth and 500 mentors to go to different performing arts events each month in Baltimore. And as part of that process, I met someone named Jesse Elliott, who went on to be a friend for many years, and then more recently had been spending time with him because we hosted a pop-up that he helped me MC the opening weekend of, where we had dozens of artists and speakers and bright future related threads. And so he had known the people that were gathering at the interval and had introduced me to them by bringing them to the pop-up. So that brought me there because I had written a letter to Jesse when I'd been in college, and I read it to his boss at the time, Richard Flood, and then I'd sent the letter, and I showed up, but he'd lost his voice that day when I arrived in DC to get a tour of the place, to be, a university student, first kind of outside role like that, in that kind of way. But he'd lost his voice, but he just wrote me a note that said, to tell me everything that you're trying to change in our cities and our society, and I'll occasionally write a note back. And we went on a 10-hour walk that day around DC, and he would just every, hour or so pause and write a, one-line note. Otherwise, just listen to me. But he's spoken up for himself many, many times over the many years since. So he got his voice back. I didn't mean to say that he's always voiceless in this. I think he's got a wonderful perspective. But we just figured out a way of finding balance after that kind of epic journey of me arriving in DC in that moment with him in that state, and it just going wonderfully ever since. So, it's a squiggly line of that kind.
I love it, man. I love it. And what was really cool was like meeting those people. And for the listeners, the interval, I think it was the name of the bar, right? Bobby, I believe. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, the
that's where we
long
were at.
now.
What is it?
It's called the Long Now is the group that owns the bar. It's a society that has, for example, an event tomorrow night that is around different parts of futurism or long-term thinking.
Nice. Very cool, man. Yeah, which I wasn't even like I'd never been exposed to any of that. That's why I went to Cali, right? Like, and I had like been in and out of San Diego once back in 2016 for a ClickFunnels event, but this was like my time, and I really like I couldn't have asked for any better because I really was like, man, I really hope I just find some like really cool, wild California people and California energy while I'm out in the Bay Area. And man, I couldn't have stumbled into a better place or a better group because meeting you guys there in the bar, and then we went to that talk which was all about Kay, who is like leading the initiative with the AI and the artist kind of project at Google. Learned a ton and took a ton from there. Being in the media space, right, having an ad tech company, and working so much with AI, I was just like, man, it was kind of divine intervention that I would have ran into everybody and made those connections that night. So it was really cool, man. So what are you working on now? Because like I think that's the coolest part. And I think where we could jam out is, there's a lot of stuff that you talk about like with social change. We talked a little bit about insurance, right? Because like we work with a lot of insurance companies, and a lot of people in California aren't super happy with the insurance companies because they pulled out, right? Because they couldn't get rate increases and whatnot. And like,
On the
where do you?
wildfire side, I can talk about the beavers and insurance, and then we should also talk about AI more deeply
Yeah,
too. On the wildfire thread, we've partnered with the United Nations Office of Disaster Risk Reduction, ARISE, with Crowd Doing Catastrophic Wildfire Prevention Consortium to have a scorecard for diagnosing what are the risks to each community and who's thinking about them, who's creatively considering them, who's in government taking responsibility for addressing them, and where is there a gap in who's taking responsibility. And through that research, we've learned about nature-based solutions as well as advanced technology. Nature-based solutions example you gave
yeah,
was that in the 1950s, there was the Great Beaver Drop example in which about 75 beavers were dropped and all but one apparently survived with parachutes. And they actually were able to prevent something on the order of a dozen megafires from crossing boundaries because they had rehydrated the landscape over the decades. And we had something closer to 500 million beavers in pre-Columbus times that we've lost vast proportions of. And so, there's some states in which every veterinarian is automatically licensed for beaver relocations, and other states in which they're not. And so there's a whole gap in, the consideration of how many beavers do we need to relocate to where they are wanted to prevent how many heart attacks, strokes, and cancer in major population centers from the air pollution spread. So I think there's a fascinating thread there that we could down the rabbit hole. In terms of the artificial intelligence layer, at Crowd Doing, we have more than 4,000 virtual volunteers collaborating with us, and we also are trying to, help each of them. And, we've had more than 50,000 volunteer applicants over the last decade. And, we have this potential to say, how can each person have a perfect volunteer role? And how can
Mm.
each person co-design that volunteer role to address a global problem? And in that spirit, there's this concept of ikigai, overlap between what you love doing, what's most rewarding for you to be doing, what you're most exceptional at doing, what the world needs you to be doing. And we've had AI help for many people go through that ikigai process. Not only help from bots, we also have hundreds of pro bono coaches that we've connected people to as well. But we have the bots because sometimes people are at not this right level of abstraction for that. So, for example, we've had a deepening ikigai process in which we've collected thousands of pages of manual data about what dimensions of roles would be ikigai relevant, where we explicitly created that to train the bot on real world context from our community. But we've also been able to build other bots that have really been helpful to community. We've built a bot that is working backwards from the future you want. We teach a course on backcasting, which means, to make your most preferred future your most probable future, and how to do so via ancient knowledge, wisdom traditions using AI. So how can you use Wu Wei or Ubuntu or Kaitia Kitanga to get yourself feedback on the design? Is it suited to your future self? Is it suited to everything that's needed to thrive in the future? And so we've had 10,000 people register for that course. And then we've had a bot adjacent to that course where we've said, what if you're going to be designing uh, with rich context theory? You can say how many layers of objective are synergistic. Apex compassion, zenith intuition, apex empathy are all synergistic. And so, how do you combine synergistic goals in your prompt engineering in order to build a Goldilocks zone for imagining the future you need to thrive? Many
Oh,
layers.
wow. Yeah, man. Would you say Ikibon?
Ikigai, Ikigai. It's a
Yeah.
uh,
Ikibon, I think, is like something I order at Cinnabon. I think that's the like the one with all the nuts
Ikigai,
on
you can
it.
think about like a Venn diagram of the
Okay.
overlap between what you love doing, what you're most exceptional at doing, what you learn most through doing, what the world most needs of you to be doing, what you're most rewarded through doing, what's meaningful to you be doing. It's like objective stack of each of your overlapping goals. But these are not goals in which each of the different goals gets in the way of each other, but in which each part of each of the goals has a synergy. And so you could say rich context theory is saying goals in general can be synergistic. You could have goals that are helping you achieve all these other goals. You could have goals that are multiplicative in a positive sense with your other goals that you're achieving. And so Ikigai is an example of that in terms of saying you have synergistic goals and what you love doing, what you're exceptional doing, what's rewarding to be doing. And of course, AI can be really useful if you give it a resume of someone and their cover letter and their LinkedIn export with their permission to workshop and go through and use Perplexity to find what's relevant to their expression, and go through a Claude or a custom GPT process with a custom Ikigai bot to add details and layers. I mean, I think that it depends on what level of abstraction you're on, right? Like if your level of abstraction is that you're connecting to the vibe of a certain part of the social impact ecosystem, then you probably would go down with the tool that used to be named Metaphor.systems that got renamed Exa, because they have a great way to start with one link and go to the other links, in that sub-universe. Versus if what you're trying to do is elucidate intent, then, feeding it through a process of gathering everything you know about the intent and then refining it, versus if you're trying to draw in intrinsic motivation like curiosity or make this inspirational for people's professional development. We believe in the service learning singularity. Real world problems are fast ways to learn. You can then use the bots to identify the epic narrative arc of the role in that
Dude,
sense,
so what would
right?
you say? Service learning? Would you say that there at the end, the service learning something or another?
Oh, well, we talk about the service learning singularity. What
Yeah,
that
what is
means,
that?
there are real world problems on which, for example, a project manager could learn how to become an excellent project manager. And they could take a course in a traditional course where they learn on make work. They learn on make believe problems and they do exercises and lessons in a vacuum, in a class sealed container with no external organization involved. And then there's these other kinds of project-based learning or social impact integrated learning or service learning, and especially in our case, systems change service learning, where people are using real-world tools like our AI tools in the mix, and they're using not just the learners alone, but the learners united in a multidisciplinary cauldron of collaboration, where they're learning from everybody else in the mix. And apparently, that has become something that decades of research has shown is can be as fast a way to learn or faster than any other way to learn. And so people
Wow.
who learn on make-believe problems, they can do it. It's fine. It's less social. It's more, whatever. But like we believe these kinds of self-directed, collaborative, real-world problem-oriented ways to learn are the fastest way to learn, in part because we can fully integrate it with technologies like artificial intelligence approaches. Like when we have the great library of positive deviance workshops where we've taken real world examples that inspire the heck out of us. And when we say those need to be turned into case studies where we have dozens of simulated experts analyzing it, those are use cases that our colleagues love. And, when we take a, example of a social venture that's done a tech transfer from the government to apply it to an important collective global challenge like wildfires, and we have a synthetic feasibility study, that work allows us to say, okay, over the next 20 years, what are all the regulatory hurdles this is going to run into? What are all the challenges getting acceptance? Form simulated committees of experts, right? Same with our
Wow.
stewardship fractalization logic model intertwinklement. In that, we're looking at each of the thousands of environmental organizations and saying, as a mission statement of what they're up to. They've each named some species they're caring about, and they've also got reports of what they've done. If we have what they've and say where do they overlap in mission, where could they collaborate, then we can do what Strive Cincinnati did, where they got $9 billion of incremental spending from 8,000 meetings, but we could have 99.9% of these meetings simulated bots, having a million years worth of meetings and then coming back to the people and saying, okay, 99.9% fewer meetings. Here's what we learned from those million hours of meetings from all this context. So, simulating what the people don't have time for, but where the needs are
Wow.
great and where we have, more potential to do that. That and probably also you could say how that fits into what's called life-wide learning, if you know that.
No, dude, I don't know any of this stuff you're talking. I came back. Like, I text my wife after I met you. I was like, I think I just met one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Like, you tell me, like, what was the we'll get into it in a second. Never mind. I don't want to get you off the Nobel Peace Prize lady you told me about at the bar, and I was like, what? And I went home and asked Chat GPT, and I was like,
Eleanor
oh,
Oscar, you mean the
yeah,
yeah, no, that we work on how to prevent tragedies of the commons in wildfire, and we've learned from her work about tragedy of the commons prevention in
yeah.
wildfire. We looked at how communities have governed assets like fisheries to not be overfished without necessarily some of the things one other might otherwise might expect. So we've learned about how anchor stakeholders have self-interest and community benefit. Fortune 500 companies have that interest, and we think that for example, an employer of one of the largest employers in Southern California could have the cost of paying for Beavers pay for itself just in their own heart attacks prevented, and we want to show them that kind of ratio that there's but on the life-wide learning, it's saying that you don't just learn from what you've officially learned. You don't just learn from what you have a degree in. You've learned from all kinds of journey, all kinds of things that are not on your resume, all kinds of aspect of story that are unique to you. And
Yeah.
lifelong learning is recognizing that all of those kinds of learning are equally real, and
Yeah.
your true map of competency reflects that whole bit.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I want to go back to the ikigai because I tell entrepreneurs often, right? Like we'll have listeners, and I know like my listeners are like, "Whoa, where did this episode cover?" I'm like Bobby's such a sharp dude, and I was like, "Man, there's so much I want to unpack with you." And I definitely want to have you on again in the future, man, because like I've learned a lot from you just talking to you. But like the ikigai, that makes sense to me because I always tell entrepreneurs when they have like a business idea and they come to me and they're like, "Coach, here's my business idea," and I'm like, "Cool. How are you going to monetize it?" It's like, "Oh, I don't know." And it's like, "Well, it's going to be really hard to stay passionate about something that makes you go bankrupt, right?" And so like that's like one of those circles, right? Like something you're passionate about, but also something that has to pay you well, right? So that you can like actually make a living off of it because you don't want to be in poverty. It's hard to stay passionate about something that makes you impoverished. But then what were like I mean, like those are the two Venn diagrams I normally draw, but you got like six other ones around it.
Well, yeah, but I would say like different kinds of it's ways to think of ikigai. Like when we do the volunteer ikigai, that's not for how they're getting paid. That's for how they're intrinsically motivated to help in a perfect role. It might, in some cases, relate to a learning goal that relates to a professional goal that might get them paid in their day job. So I'm not saying it's never relevant. I just want to acknowledge that. But think about it this way: those are three goals or four goals, right? You probably have 50 other goals, given all the passions, avocations, curiosities, dimensions of
Yeah.
yourself, right? So Ikigai is the beginning of a prompt to co-design perfect role at every phase of your journey based on what
Wow.
parts of your work the bots make obsolete, what parts of the work will break if you don't step into the loop as the human in that loop. And this is part of how we have agency, right? We work on it from the perspective of self-determination theory. Ryan Deci, they talk about how everybody has a shortfall of autonomy because they have what's called positive and negative autonomy. Negative autonomy is freedom
Okay.
from control. Positive autonomy is freedom to what you would do if you collaborate rightly with all the other humans and bots at your maximum possible potential. And
Say that again, Bobby. The,
negative autonomy is freedom from control. That's
so
kind of the
meaning
liberty
I'm not
autonomy,
controlled at
like
all, right?
no one can challenge what I'm trying to do in this regard. It's my zone of control from outside it. That's negative autonomy. But there's
Okay.
another kind of autonomy, which is positive autonomy, which is freedom to collaborate. Freedom to collaborate with bots, freedom to collaborate with humans, freedom to partner with other organizations. And almost everybody, almost all of the time, is starved of their positive autonomy, in part because they're not collaborating deeply enough and broadly enough to have apex goals and zenith
Hmm.
means of achieving them. And Ryan Deci say if you have depth and breadth of collaboration, all the disciplines you need, whether through humans or bots, and whether you have all the relevant capacity collectively to do what you really want to do, then your goals become more and more perfect for you, and your means of achieving them become more and more realistic. And so we use bots in part to address our gaps in autonomy, but we also use bots to help bring our humans together to collaborate more deeply too.
So you guys so is this like you're saying like these bots can have like me like so you basically are saying like, hey, here let me build three or four bots and let them just debate this at length with themselves and saves the humans hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of meeting that then maybe brings a more distilled version than just maybe sitting a prompt up to chat gpt, right? Is that my understanding that right?
Well, it depends on which context, right? There's multiple that got drawn into that dotted line. across my contextuality. So I'll just give it an example that might illustrate in that spirit, which is there's something we worked on for the heliogenesis project, and they, have this notion that there's going to be 1 billion climate refugees coming up, and that they want
Oh,
to
wow.
get prepared for that by building an open source material stack that could build cities for them without extracting in ways that will harm the environment further. So, how to build cities for them without collapsing the ecology further than it already has been harmed. And so, they asked me to use the AI tools at my disposal to review scholarly evidence about every open source bacterial strain or synthetic bioleaching, or biomining option that exists to grow any of their top 1,000 materials that they consider essential to build a fully functional city. And
Wow.
that is something that we were able to, just in the feasibility study, find more than 100 of those materials had already had the full equipment in scientific terms to replicate in a bioleaching, biomining, or synthetic bio approach those materials. And so then having the synthetic experts not only review those articles that are beyond my disciplinary scope to understand myself, but then also to have them dialogue about the future scenarios of how those could reach the scale that these folks are talking about. Became a synthetic feasibility study is where we take experts and we use the inference to have the mind inference evaluate like a business plan feasibility study. We've done hundreds of pages of that in, an XYZ project and then turn that into a formal business plan. We also do that more at the design layer. We call it a regenerative AI working document. We've actually gotten there to the point where we've run out of room for context window because in one of the initiatives, Nature Counter, we've gotten it to more than 1,500 pages plus of brainstorm with the AI that we've been
Holy
able
shit.
figure out from that what are all the potential. This is to democratize nature immersion. If you get time in nature, like in the park, your
Yep.
glucocorticoids go down, your catecholamines go down, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin goes up, and you get more compassion, creativity, reduced rumination, hundreds of benefits. So we have a brainstorm with the bots about that subject that we fed it many, many scholarly articles and many, many layers of iteration. So you could say some of these are like massive brainstorm documents. Some of these are like formal synthetic dialogue of many, many pages between either real people that we're simulating if they lead organization XYZ, and we have their, speech. We can simulate what they would think about this maybe in this scenario. We do
Wow.
philanthropy where we say here are the 5 published speeches of this person. What would allow us to be in right relationship with them for this organization, and how do we simulate
Wow.
30 years of what their relationship would have been, and if they had been in a right relationship. And then we do that with AIM and the Active Inference Institute, AIME Mentoring and Active Inference Institute. We've been working on the right relationship singularity. That's using bots and humans. Similarly, we do that in the Pro Bono Speaker Bureau, where we have the bots listen to the podcast to say, here are the 10 previous episodes in which the host had a curiosity that relates to what this person is super expert at. How do we write a letter of inquiry that weaves in all of those 10 prior curiosities to bring us into the
Wow.
Goldilocks reality?
That's crazy, man. Oh man, there's so much to unpack there, Bobby. Let me talk. Let me like guys, and if you're listening to this right now, I hope you're like, what? I've got notes over here. Like social impact systems and service learning singularity and system changes and life-wide learning. Like word tracks I've never even like it weren't in my vocabulary before today's podcast. So I'm hoping that you guys that are listening with us are also taking this stuff away. Positive versus negative autonomy, which is insane in and of itself. Let's zoom out super high level, Bob, because like you, I mean, your knowledge base is insane. Where do you see small businesses, right? Because like not all businesses the same, right? The mom and pop shop that's out there, or the small to medium business enterprise is not playing the same game that the big Fortune 500 guys are, right? And so from a small business standpoint, where do you see maybe one, two, or three areas that maybe they're not even engaged with AI right now, right? Because like a lot of times I tell small business owners, like, listen, I know AI seems like a lot, it seems a little overwhelming, but in 1999, so did the internet, right? But like you see where that got you if you just said, "No, I'm not touching it," right? Like it's the plumber in 2010 that hasn't built a website yet that is like, "Why did my phone stop ringing all of a sudden?" It's like, "Well, cuz the new guy in town did get on the internet bandwagon, built the website, is ranking top. People aren't going to Yellow Pages anymore. They're going to Google. And so now this plumber's getting the business, not this guy. I'm curious with your level of knowledge around this and you're just I mean, the way that you explain things is very interesting to me. Where do you see some opportunities for maybe the people that are just like, man, I don't know about this AI stuff. It's a little scary to me. It's a little overwhelming. Like, where do you see maybe some opportunities for your end for my listeners in the small business world?
I think there's different layers. I mean, one layer is attracting the right talent. I think AI has been extremely helpful to put a reframe on what is needed and what is requested. I remember when I realized that a role that I had worked hard on was so improved by the AI that I have not gone back to my own human-made role description for that particular role ever since because 10,000% more effective after I had the AI improvement of the role description in terms of what it attracted and what recruitment it attracted. So I think
Wow.
that there's an acceptance that even as I'm a playwright by earlier training and journey, so I believe in my words, I care about my words, but my words are not always right for every audience, for every purpose, in every way. And so being able to translate through the AI to community in different ways, I think is the first key thing, being able to communicate with
Wow.
stakeholders in that way. I think that another layer is being able to take a discursive, dialogic, or free flow and brainstorm and record it using some kind of app on your phone, or ultimately, I also like using Descript to take then the transcript and then put that back into one of the tools. But if you do that and then go into Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude, and then you bridge with it, or you go to mymap.ai and you take a mind map of it, or you go to gamma.app and you build a PowerPoint of it. Sometimes we build 50 PowerPoints brainstorming on a particular topic and then cobble together 5% of the slides that reflect the part of the thesis that it got right. But what I'd say is in
Bobby,
general,
can I stop you on that one real quick? What were those resources? Because I'm big with giving my listeners resources. You said Perplexity, Gamma.ai. What was the other one?
gamma.app, not gamma.ai. It's
Oh, Gamma.app. Okay.
actually, yeah, gamma.app, not
Okay. And
it's
and then there was one you said so that one's for
.ai.
what was the mind map one?
Um, sorry, good.
What was the mind map?
Yeah, there's mymap .ai,
Okay.
uh, and depending on how far you're trying to, have concept elasticity or neuroplasticity, if you want the AI to act, more psychedelically stretched in concept abstraction, then novel AI as well, right? So novelai.net. But
Okay.
it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I also think that for certain purposes, brainstorming with Pi app, has been a way too. But basically, thinking about it as at what level are you brainstorming? Audio with friends or audio with bot, whatever it is. How do you take the transcript of that brainstorm or record it and then build a transcript of the brainstorm, put it into a formal processing layer where it can turn that into a roadmap or turn that into a list of options or surface that in a way that becomes actionable, you know?
Yeah.
And having Claude take whatever your intention is and then use that as the translator for all the other bots. Because basically, Claude is better at prompting than our humans brains generally are right now. And
I've
that
noticed that.
if you want to get the most out of Perplexity or any of the other tools, you go and if you really want it to go apexly, probably go to Claude first, prompt engineer it, get your intent right there until it feels like, oh yes, this is exactly what I want, and then take that to the other bots as a sequence, because otherwise you end up getting to um, the gap between your intent and the degree to which it understands your intent is almost always larger than you think it is until you do that.
The gap to say that again, the last part, the gap to your intent.
Gap between your intention and what the bot interprets your intention to be is almost larger than you think it is or should be until you've
Yeah.
gotten Claude to prompt re-engineer first and then take that to the other bots.
I love that. So for my listeners that are lost right now, Claude is Anthropic's AI platform, and you can go to Claude. What Bobby, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying go to Claude, jam with it, say, hey, this is what I'm wanting this other thing to do. I need you to help me build a prompt. Go back and forth with it for a while until it's like, hey, here's the prompt that you need to go plug into Chat GPT or whatever, and it's like, okay, cool. Because we hear that all the time on the news, right? Is like the future of AI is really only as good as the prompt can be, right? Like because it can't just like hop off the couch and start working on its own, not yet. But it's like it needs that prompt, and so the better your prompt, the better the output from the bots. Am I tracking properly there?
The ability to use each of these for what they're best at is, what we have to challenge ourselves with. I think the Claude is a intention translator in terms of what the prompt engineering is about. If you take Perplexity, I treat that as the pathway to the greatest due diligence from the open web of information that you don't already have, perfectly in zone. If you're gathering new information from new sources, go to Perplexity.
Okay.
Or if you're gathering, unless you're gathering like purely scientific evidence, in which case GPT consensus or Scholar GPT, as well as Perplexity in combination. But once you're actually at the point of, doing analysis on a chunk of information that's already extracted into a place where that can be operated upon, then GPT is at that point. ChatGPT can then, serve you well at that phase of it.
And is that the I saw a I actually met Yaroslav down in he owns Railsware. He was the guy that helped the founder build out Calendly, and he was telling me that he showed me this graphic with ChatGPT. You know, if you just log in, it just goes to the like 4.0 or whatever. But he said the O3 Mini with deep search was just like it's like the reasoning with that thing is just like off the charts compared to the other models. Do you concur with that?
I'm not offering a comment on something where you've got a quote from someone else that's specific on that. I think that that's a different category of question or a different category of weave. But
I love it.
that I don't have a monopoly on thinking about these tools by training 10,000 students to learn what we'd learned about this kind of process of using design principles, really. Like in our case, we're talking about it to say like, give me Ubuntu as I am because we are, right? So using Ubuntu, refine my business concept, refine my startup roadmap for this social venture we're building, right?
Wow.
You can do that with these tools. The prompt engineering layer of that is really interesting. Kaitiakatanga is stewardship of all the native species in a comprehensive, passionate way from the Maori. You can ask it, redesign my business plan based on Kaitiakatanga, and it will find more opportunities for you to be regeneratively in alignment, right? So I think
Wow.
it depends on what level of abstraction you're on. There's the general notion that you can use these tools with ancient wisdom, but we also
Yeah.
have downloaded additional ancient wisdom supplements to give it even more context on some ancient wisdom fractals, especially where it has more knowledge about some things than others. But basically, you can rise to the level of abstraction that restores your agency through a sequence of these tools and humans in collaboration. But ultimately, you got to be in the right hybrid intelligence for that to be a collective agency rather than a collective squandering of agency.
I love it. I haven't done this one yet. Take that one to the bank. I always I have a little cash register sound effect when somebody drops a knowledge bomb, as I call them. We say take that one to the bank. So I think that's very fitting. Man, let me just run back through these PyApp, Perplexity, Novel AI, Mind Map, Gamma. Guys, we've given you so many resources in this podcast of how you can use this. Bobby, let's talk about something that I know is super, this the social change, the systemic change. Where do you see that? And then like what do you hope to see, man? Like what excites you about the work that you do? And like what is your long-term goal that you could maybe share? Because I love saying, the more you put goals out into the universe, the more likely they are to come true because more people like maybe hear it and say, "Hey, I want to help with that. I want to work on this with Bobby." Right? Who knows who will be listening to this podcast? But like, I just want to give you a few minutes here at the end as we wrap up to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so different fractal layers. I mean, I think if you go back a dozen years ago when I was serving on the board of the Social Enterprise Alliance, I got them to create a T-shirt with the back of it saying every enterprise should be a social enterprise. Every enterprise has a unique opportunity to serve multiple needs, including the sustainability of the team building it, but also community in ways that transform us in ways that we need. So I think there's a general narrative that I tend not to be motivated by just small business out of context of those with purpose. The businesses with purpose, are the ones that are inspiring to me. And that can be a small business with purpose, it could be a large business with purpose, but every business should find the right alignment to purpose. And now we have new tools with these AI tools to find purpose. You can, use
Mm.
Notebook LM and create a podcast about how you are aligning to purpose and get the bots to tell you a story back to yourself until it resonates with yourself. And I think that that's powerful. But more generally, I'd say that, we believe that all these social impact movements should be deeply collaborative. As collaborative as a startup, even if it's as large as a problem as climate change or biodiversity collapse or wildfire prevention, etc. And so we want that to be real. We think that the fastest way to learn is collaboratively, and that we've got a few billion people and we've got a lot of bots to learn with. And so, how do we learn and recycle that time to the maximal degree for the sake of our collective agency? From a solar punk perspective, I don't just want any old future. I want a future a trillion, which means 27 orders of magnitude brighter, which means, we ask our example in positive deviance to be, examples from, Brazil, Ruas Project. They get half homeless, half not homeless to eat together. That's 1,000 times more compassionate. If you design programs that compassionate, and then if you also design them to be, Burning Man feels 1,000 times more creative than the average context. So to be 1,000 times more creative and 1,000 times more compassionate, that's only 6 orders of magnitude. I would challenge every business creator, every social venture creator, every nonprofit creator to work towards a future a trillion, trillion, trillion times brighter, and don't rest at 6 orders of magnitude brighter. Find as many dimensions of better in design as you need to be in your Goldilocks zone for design. Because, we have extremely rare chances to be in radical collaboration with the more than human world at an interspecies level, the bots and human world at a hybrid intelligence level, and billions of humans are connected digitally, which means that we don't have to be, in squandered station disciplinarily. We can be in community with all the other fields we need, so that none of us are, um, isolated from the agency that we gain if we're in the right flow state with the right global intentionality of shared purpose and the right collective ability to have line of sight to bright futures. That's what I think each of us bring, is a different line of sight to bright future, and
Mm.
collaboration brings depth perception or parallax so that you can see the route from here to there. But it's not a zigzag. We've learned from our colleague in New Zealand that the Maori have the notion that the zigzag up the mountain is a fiction because the squiggly line is the real journey, because there's changes in the weather, there's changes in the context, and the acceptance of the squiggle is the acceptance of the pivot to the startup. So pivot towards something that matters to you, inspires the heck out of you, and that aligns to what the future you would be grateful to you for. We had a exhibit at the solar punkification event where people write a letter to their future self and from their future self, from our friend artist who created a guide to that. And if your entrepreneurs were sending a letter to their future self, whether they get a bot to help them or not, or a letter from their future self saying, "Thank you for pivoting. This makes me
Yeah,
happy," because you got to something that, I'm grateful that your future self is grateful to you. I think that's kind of where you
that's
get
cool.
ikigai, infinite super alignment for startup, autopoiesis, and social impact and transformational agency all.
I love it, man. I love it. I'm gonna hop off of here and go play with Claude now with some of these new frameworks that I've learned and ask, hey, here's my business. Because like it's so easy to get stuck like and I know we were about to wrap, but if you got a couple more minutes, I want to keep jamming with you because what you just said there is, figure out like, hey, just because we're making it a little better, cool. Like, but that's like six levels, or whatever you said, six magnitudes or whatever. But it's like, how do we get to a trillion, right? Because like for us, like I used to have no company culture in my business. I've talked about this at extent. It's like, I pay you, show up, do the job, make the business a profit, be happy you got a job, right? That's how I used to run my companies. And it was a terrible way to do it. The turnover was awful. People hated to work for me. And so like I started creating company culture where we have core values, right? It's growth, innovation, velocity, and excellence. And that's an acronym that spells give. And so once a quarter, we give back to Family Scholar House. And my team loves it, right? Because it's not just about grinding to make a dollar or to take money to the bottom line anymore. It's about, hey, let's build a business so that we're not so penny pinched. We're making profits so that we can actually take a day to give, right? We can give back and we can help a nonprofit. And what you're saying is like cool, DJ, but like how could you take that 10 times bigger? And one of the things that I actually happened last year was we had been doing this for about 2 years, and I said, hey, there's this client of ours that actually has a really big construction company. He told me about a grant program. He had no idea who Family Scholar House was. I said, here's what they do. They help, abused women that are single mothers. Like, if you guys haven't ever an opportunity, they gave 100 grand to that organization. So it was like by me sharing and saying, hey, just giving once a quarter isn't enough. What else could I do? Going and introducing my friend. Look at the change that helped, right? Like they brought more there. So I think that's what Bobby is all challenging us to do is like you have this intelligent tools now that way maybe you're banging your head against the wall like I don't know how I can give my business. Go just jam out with ChatGPT and be like, hey, here's my business. This is what I'm passionate about. Like, what are some ways that we can give back or make our organization better to create an exponential change?
Or
Um,
want to jam directly with ChatGPT, jam with a friend that you have permission to record your jam, and then transcribe that jam and give that to ChatGPT. A zillion times
wow.
that works, very well as a
Yeah,
starting because the intention setting by humans is generally well directed, but there's not necessarily a high resolution adjacent possible established with ground truths that you can see visibly from the outset with all the assumptions transparent and the pathway from here to there extremely visibly paved over. That's something that the AI can really augment pretty quickly and marvelously
wow.
if we use the right combination of tools. What I would generally say is you feed the evidence from Perplexity back into something like ChatGPT, but ultimately the writer of choice for the thing that humans read is Claude and for the intent at the beginning. But often
Okay.
the logic work is through the GPT phase, and the EXA is probably more to say who are the other groups that align to this, but then you can feed those lists back to Perplexity, and then you could say, what is the gap in my approach compared to the peers that I want to align to in terms of values that I share with them? There's a values gap in what I'm doing between what I'm doing and the groups that I'm inspired by, right?
That's cool.
I want to learn from the groups that I'm inspired by, and I think that that's part of being inspired by the things that people want to be emulated. There's, aspects. W. L. Gore wanted other organizations to learn from their above the line, below the line in innovation notion that everybody at the organization could innovate anything without permission if it was not going to, endanger the organization. It was above the waterline, and if it was below the waterline, they needed permissions, etc. So I think there's examples where, organizations want to inspire each other, but it's up to us to attune our own curiosity to why we might have relevance from what they're up to. in a way that we're allowed to emulate. NVU inspired us, enviu.org, social venture in the Netherlands years ago. And, but they said they wanted aspects of what they did, like work on systems change and the fact that venture labbing is possible, to be learned by other organizations. And we did. We took that lesson to heart. And so,
Wow.
Ikigai we learned because we were recruiting visual live, visual um, graphic recording volunteers to do live meeting animation style discovery of what we were thinking. And we found one that said,
Wow.
your your intent is hyper ikigai. That's what I can pivot you towards. Please listen to me. You don't need graphic recording. You need to be ikigai-fi. We now have had more than 10 different ikigai related initiatives since then. So, it's also a question of whether you have the ability to pivot without breaking what you've built, but, having the ability to attune to something better may exist from all your dialogues and journey. Conferences are not, just to build one-way relationality. They're to be an intertwingularity with community so that you can bright future together.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, it took so much away from some being out there, and I feel different, and it was just everybody was so connected, and I don't know. It's like being in Kentucky, right? That's those like those hippies in California, right? And it's like kind of, but like it's also like y'all are just in tune with some shit out there, man. You guys just vibrate at a different frequency, which is so cool. And I would just challenge, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, guy from California, systemic changes and social intervention. Oh, it's socialism. It's like, no, there's a happy median in between where, and this is a hard thing to figure out, but there is a happy medium where you can make a lot of money and be a successful entrepreneur and do good. I don't think that they have to be separated like we've been told for so many decades, right? It's been like a zero sum game where like somebody has to win and somebody has to lose.
Well,
Bobby's challenged us to say
that's
like
part of
how.
not just social enterprise theory. There's something called beta stewardship related to that, which is that
Okay.
Fortune 500 companies, their shareholders, except the founders, own shares in the whole market. So the Home Depot biodiversity shareholder resolution, every Canadian pension fund voted for it because they said, if this company takes an action that harms the rest of our portfolio, that's harming the shareholders because the shareholders are shareholders in the market. And so the
Mm,
idea that shareholder primacy has been reductionistly narrowed historically to a Milton Friedmanite notion that it's just the shareholder only owns shares in this one company. That's a canard. Almost every shareholder owns shares in other parts of the economy. And so the idea that every pension fund in Canada voted to be able to to reflect that the shareholders are multi-sided stakeholders too, and therefore acting in their interest can't be a way to avoid responsibility to the things that they are stakeholders of. It has to be reflective of that wholeness. And so I think that that's part of it too, is that yes, we can be social venture creators of companies that do good, but every company has stakeholders who are more interconnected that unless they're blindfolded in themselves, they should ultimately be in radical acknowledgement of.
yeah, man. I love that. I think that's a great spot to leave it, dude. I appreciate you coming on, Bobby. If people want to find you online, they want to check out some of these projects. Like, what's the best way to go out there and locate some of your work or get in contact with you?
Well, there's a crowd doing YouTube channel, crowddoing.world. There's solarpunctification.art. There's preventwildfire.world. There's naturecounter.world. We have an Udemy course on backcasting from a solar punk future. I'm Bobby Fishkin, and wonderful to be on Spaceship Earth with y'all.
Yeah, man. Love it, dude. Thank you so much, Bobby. Guys, I hope you all enjoyed that wild journey with Bobby. Like I told you, he was a very cool guy that I met in California, along with some very other creative people that hopefully we'll have on in future episodes. So, with that being said, I'm your host, Coach Carroll. If you guys haven't liked, shared, comment, left a review, please do so. It helps the podcast get in front of more people, so we can help more people achieve their dream. Until next time, hustle. It's worth it.